Hi, everyone. This is Bridget calling at C3 Communications. I am really excited for this next webinar in our diversity and inclusion series about reaching the US Hispanic market, particularly on digital media, and particularly for nonprofit organizations. This is something that we talk to the nonprofits who we work with about a lot, and we know it's a pain point for many of you. So we're really excited to have an expert, Carlos Salinas from Spanish Media, with us today to talk more about this really important audience that's only going to continue to grow over the next few years. And so what we wanted to start out doing with this and every webinar that we do, we always encourage you to ask questions throughout. And so our first question for you to kind of get everyone engaging and using that questions box that you'll see over to the side there is, we'd love to know, is your organization currently reaching out to the Hispanic community? And if you are, how so? So let us know in the questions field there, whether you are, whether you're not, and if you are, how so and how that's going. Okay, I see one person with a no. That's good. You'll be here. You'll learn a lot today. Good. I see another one, not so much. So we've got a lot of people who are just starting out at the very beginning. That's great. Someone says in a limited way with translated materials. I think that's a good start, but we'll talk more about that too. That's great. I see someone else say yes, we are via the online community and various social media. That's great. We're going to focus a lot on that. I'll wait and see if we get a few more in here if you're entering your answers. And thank you everyone for joining us today and being engaged and being a part of this conversation. I think it's so important, and I'm really excited to talk more about this subject. Okay, and the last one I'll share for now is someone who says, yes, we currently work with partner organizations like NCLR, but we'd love to know more about how to do it directly. So those are all great answers, and I think it shows that there is a broad range of skill levels and ability here, or kind of experience just within the group of people who are with us here today. So that's fantastic. And I'm so excited to have Carlos Salinas here with us. He's the CEO of Spanish Media, and he is an expert in this subject by far, both from his own personal experience and just working with organizations on this subject constantly. So Carlos, I will turn it over to you and let you lead us through the webinar, but I'll continue to jump in with questions throughout as they come up. So please keep leaving your questions there.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bridget. It is an honor to be with you today and share what we know with you about the Hispanic market, not only from members of the Hispanic community itself, but also as advertisers. The name of our company is Spanish Media, and what we do is Hispanic digital marketing. That, in essence, means that we help marketers use technology to find and connect with the Hispanic customers that really matter to their brand or their organization. The main reason why I'm so excited to be able to share our lessons learned with you today is because the material that you're about to see is the result of literally years of meetings, phone calls, emails, presentations, conversations with marketers in all types of industries and all types of business organizations, nonprofit organizations. We have learned a lot, again, from an advertising standpoint, regarding what it takes to successfully connect with Hispanic customers. It involves a lot of work, but the results are incredible. So let me step you through the process of what it is that we have learned, starting from the beginning. We have learned that a lot of people, chances are, they already are familiar with the Hispanic market and the impact that this culture has had on the mainstream American market. Maybe in terms of sports or entertainment or cuisine or art. Chances are you already you're familiar with some of the faces on this slide. You have probably read some reports. You have probably watched some news items, for instance, about the impact that Latinos are expected to have in the upcoming elections. So this is not new to you. What we're going to talk about today, though, is different. We're going to talk about things that you may not know about the Hispanic market that are incredibly important for marketers to know. So let's start with that.
I have a question for you, Carlos, and this might be on a future slide.
Sure.
But I know, we've talked about the terms Hispanic and Latino and when one is appropriate and when the other is. And so maybe you can just kind of define terms from the very beginning here. How do you use the terms Hispanic and Latino and in your experience, what do those different terms describe?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is a little it is complex. We could spend another webinar doing it. There's some people who feel there is a clear difference. There's some people who feel there's not a difference. So for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to use the word Hispanic, not necessarily because it may be the most appropriate or because it's the correct term, but because in terms of advertising, that term it's typically what it's used when we refer to the Hispanic population. And again, if you talk to someone else, they might say, no, 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 it's not Hispanic, it's Latino. It's a very controversial issue, but again, just for the purpose of keeping us centered on the content, we're just going to use Hispanic throughout the presentation with that in mind.
And when we do say Hispanic, we mean Spanish speaking, which is regardless of ethnicity or nationality. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Hmm.
Um, the Hispanic market, and we're going to talk about all this in detail. The Hispanic market is not monolithic. Even within the market, you have different segments. Some are more comfortable with English, some are more comfortable with Spanish. But beyond just the language, Hispanic, we're talking about mostly people as a culture, as a set of traditions, as a set of values that really define a Hispanic as a person beyond maybe what they do for a living or the language that they prefer to speak at home. So we are sort of grouping everything together just to simplify the conversation and for the purposes of illustrating the different concepts that we're going to go through during the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. It's a great frame.
Yeah, but it's a great question too. Um, and that's another thing that I wanted to point out. The information that you'll hear today comes again from a perspective of someone not only who's a member of the Hispanic community, but someone who's been doing advertising for a long time. Obviously, I'm not the official spokesman of the Hispanic community. I don't represent everyone. And because of that, some of the things that you're going to hear today, you're going to disagree with. Some other ones are going to resonate with you very strongly. And that's okay. That's the purpose of having an event like this, where we can exchange different points of view. We can come up with different ideas and hopefully come up with an approach that solves a solution, that serves as a solution for a problem or an opportunity that many organizations are facing today, which is how do we connect with the Hispanic market? So having said that, let's talk about some things that you may not know about the Hispanic market. You probably don't know that right now there are entire industries looking to the Hispanic market for growth and survival. American industries, that is. For instance, healthcare is heavily dependent on the Hispanic culture, Hispanic people. You may remember when the Affordable Care Act first started, they were saying, well, it's all going to depend on the rate of adoption by Hispanics. It's a very powerful demographic. The automotive industry, year after year, its growth, it's fueled by Hispanics buying cars. Beauty care, it's another category that depends pretty heavily on the Hispanic consumers. Travel is increasingly looking at the Hispanic market for growth. Expedia, for instance, increased its Hispanic marketing budget almost 200% last year because they have identified Hispanics as a key demographic. The Hispanic market is so attractive right now, and I can tell this because we get these types of phone calls, that companies from other countries like Mexico and Latin America, they're looking for ways to grow and are trying to connect with Hispanics here in the United States. So it's a tremendous opportunity. The natural question then is why? Why are Hispanics in the United States so attractive to marketers? Well, let's start with the facts. These are not opinions, these are not editorials, these are facts that come straight from the US Census Bureau. There's a lot of us in the country. I checked the latest numbers yesterday, and it's about 50 million, 57 million Hispanics living in the US. That's about a 17% of the total population, or 1 in 6 people in the country who are Hispanic. The numbers continue to grow, not only in the past. For instance, from 2000 to 2014, the Hispanic population accounted for more of half of the total growth of the population in the United States. There are so many Hispanics living in the United States that, with the exception of Mexico, no other country in the world has more Hispanics living inside its borders than the United States. And also, with the exception of Mexico, no other country in the world has more people speaking Spanish inside the borders, pardon me, other than the United States. More than numbers, though, more than the sheer population and the growth of the population, that growth has translated into massive spending power. The latest figures are $1.5 trillion in spending power. To put things in perspective, just put things into terms that we can understand. If the US Hispanic market were a country, it would be one of the top 20 economies in the entire world. In terms of GDP, the US Hispanic market is bigger than South Korea, Russia, Australia, Spain, or Mexico. So we're talking about a lot of folks who have a lot of money, and we like to spend. We like to spend that money.
And if I can
Another,
just chime in here for a second, from the nonprofit perspective too, I think this is something that I've talked a lot about with, both the nonprofits that C3 works with, and also with in interviews with potential donors when we're working with organizations, and we're actually going on and interviewing people in the Hispanic community about their donation habits. And so I think, while we're, sharing this information through kind of a consumer and for-profit frame, that money's up for grabs for nonprofits as well. And I think a lot of times this audience gets overlooked because of, kind of stereotypical ideas about Hispanics maybe not having as much money as some of their white counterparts who could be major donors. But I think we're just seeing more and more that that's not the case. And it's a stereotype based in some deep-seated bias. And so I think, letting us move beyond that bias and actually, take this audience really seriously and speak to them literally in their language, and also by, speaking to their culture. I think that's a huge opportunity for nonprofits to connect with people who would really care about their missions.
it is, that's a great point. Um, Again, a lot of organizations are looking at the Hispanic market for growth. And that includes also nonprofits who need more volunteers, who need more donors, who need more support in general. The Hispanic market also, the numbers and the type of culture that we are, makes us ideal candidates to be part of the growth of an organization. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. Um, the other thing that we wanted to share with you, because it's important, is the amount of digital activity that Hispanics undertake on a given day. By any metric, US Hispanics over-index any other demographic group in the country in terms of digital use. We simply share more, buy more, watch more, and do more online than any other demographic group in the country. This is important because when we talk about specific things that we can do as nonprofit organizations to connect with Hispanic customers, we're going to revisit this slide. It's an important slide that we need to keep in mind. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the culture, and this is more aligned with the values that we have as people. There's three things that I would think define us as values to us: family, loyalty, and religion. family is incredibly important to us, and that has very interesting implications. Let me just give you a quick example. When I graduated from college, I had a long commute when I got my first job. So at the time, I was driving a 1987 Honda Accord, which I absolutely loved, but it just wasn't enough for the commute that I had on an everyday basis. So one day I went to my parents and I said, I need to buy a car. Is that okay? My commute it's pretty strong. It's pretty bad. They said, okay, well, yeah, you can buy a car. Keep in mind, I was buying the car and I was going to drive the car, but still I had to ask for permission. So my parents looked at me and said, you can buy the car. Well, let's do it on Saturday. So that Saturday, a team of people that consisted of my parents, myself, my sister's boyfriend, a couple of friends who spoke really good Spanish, our landlord in case we needed credit references. About 10 people just descended upon the Honda dealership here in Chicago, and we all decided that the best car for me was going to be a Honda Prelude, which I absolutely love and I still drive to this day. So it was a good decision. But the point is, we made those decisions as a group. And you're going to see that when you go to the bank, you see people who go as families to open a checking account. When they go and buy a car, when they go buy a house, when they go and buy insurance, you'll see us as groups because of that family dynamic that we have. It also means, for instance, that we tend to live at home until the time we're married. That translates into a Hispanic household that has multiple generations living in that household at any given time. You have the grandparents, you have the parents, you have children. So it's very interesting dynamic. And again, loyalty not only to the family, but to our causes, the things that we believe in, the values that we keep close to our heart and we support. And religion is also very important. Overwhelmingly Catholic. Most Hispanics are Catholic, but beyond just specific religious affiliation, faith in general, it's very important to Hispanic people. Now that we have a better understanding of the Hispanic market in terms of what we value, in terms of who we are, in terms of the purchasing power that we have, the next topic that we want to talk about is what's the best way to engage with the US Hispanic market? How do we do it? Well, there are three very, very basic pillars that we call when it comes to making a decision of that magnitude. The who, the what, and the how. The who refers to the type of outreach that you want to employ when reaching US Hispanics. We're gonna talk about this in detail. The what refers to what is it that you're promoting? What are you using to connect with Hispanics beyond technology at the more fundamental emotional level? And the how are the tools that organizations use to make that connection possible. So that's a quick overview. Let's start with the who. Authenticity is very important for us. There's commercials on TV where you have the owner of a company who speaks in broken English, broken Spanish about why you should come and see me. That we usually don't connect with that. We want to see someone who understands our values, understands the struggles, understands the concerns, and that typically is reflected through language. So even when someone who doesn't speak Spanish is not available to be your representative or to talk to the Hispanic community in general, just the validity of the cause that you're promoting or the values that you're promoting becomes incredibly, incredibly important. Let me just give you an example. When it comes to authenticity, right? We have a Halloween coming up in the United States. It's a very festive event. You're going to see, a lot of people getting together, a lot of celebrations. You're going to see the ads in the store. but you won't see Hispanic families engaging in this celebration as much as the mainstream counterparts will engage into the celebration. Sure, you're gonna see parents walking down the street with their children trick or treating because it's tradition, but you won't see the culture, the cultural aspects of it as strongly as you would see us in other celebrations, like, for instance, Christmas. And I'll tell you why. Because Halloween in our culture, it's basically called Dia de los Muertos or Day of the Dead, and it's a more solemn event rooted in faith and tradition. It's when you take the time to contemplate the life and the memory of the people that you have lost. Maybe you go home to talk with your family. So it's again a more solemn event for us.
And
Because of that, uh,
I was going to
go
say,
ahead.
I'm really glad that you brought up this example, Carlos, because I think that for many of the people who are on this webinar who are just kind of getting started with their outreach to the Hispanic community, I think that holidays like this can be a really great entry point for, testing out communications and testing out some of these, assumptions that we're stating around, the values of Hispanic audiences to see if that resonates with your own audiences for your nonprofit. Because like Carlos said earlier, no, the Hispanic audience is not a monolith. But at the same time, I think holidays like these are a great opportunity to reach a broad range within that audience, and kind of create this easy access and opportunity for nonprofits to reflect some of those same values or interests that their Hispanic audiences have if they don't have as much experience connecting with that audience and your communications.
Yes, that's an excellent point. On the same topic of authenticity, this was very interesting. When the Major League team, the Philadelphia Union, opened a franchise in Philadelphia, they were looking for sponsors for their T-shirts, for their jerseys. So they found this sponsor called Bimbo, and they put the logo on their T-shirts, and there was an uproar by the community. Oh my God, why do they have to put that word in their jerseys? Obviously, bimbo has a negative connotation in the English language, but in Spanish, Bimbo is one of the most beloved brands in the Hispanic community. It's authentic, it resonates with us, and we embrace it without giving it a second thought because Bimbo is a manufacturer of treats and sweet bread that you eat when you're children. Um, it's so common for these items to be in a Hispanic household that when you are ill, it's customary, almost guaranteed, that you're going to be eating bimbo bread and yogurt or milk. I had surgery a few months ago, and I was home, and my dad came to visit me, and guess what he had with him? He had bimbo bread and he had yogurt because that's what we do. So, needless to say, there was no backlash from the Hispanic community. They adopted the Philadelphia Union jerseys just fine. But again, it goes back to the issue of authenticity. This is something that connects with us beyond language. From a cultural standpoint, this is something that we accept. Now, let's talk about the what. What is the content that you're trying to promote? What we found is that organizations that are successfully connecting with Hispanic customers beyond language, they're establishing an emotional connection with them, an emotional connection based on their experience and with their priorities in mind. What does that mean? If you are, for instance, promoting a cause that supports children or homelessness or something like that, you appeal to the family values. Even if you don't use Spanish, just the images that you show, the stories that you may tell through your movies or through your graphics, as long as those images and that story resonates with the values that we will support it because we have an emotional connection to that cause. There is an excellent commercial that Coca-Cola made not too long ago, which to this day remains one of the most successful YouTube commercials played of all time. And you've probably seen it on TV. It just shows Hispanic dad and his daughter dancing for a quinceañera, a cotillion. Um, they're practicing the dance. The father can't get it right. The daughter is very disappointed, but they drink a Coca-Cola, and then the father all of a sudden can dance, and everything is great. The point of that commercial is that no word was spoken. They played a song that it is popular in the Hispanic culture, and they took advantage, or they knew how to take advantage of an occasion that's also very close to our hearts, which is quinceañeras or cotillions. They combined the two, and they generated incredible success and engagement with their Hispanic audience. Again, understanding the values, the priorities, what it is that we care about, it's going to be much more successful than maybe even the tools that you use, maybe the language that you use. Just keeping in mind those values and concerns, that's going to be really helpful. Again, let me give you an example. The Got Milk campaign, when it got started, it kind of had a rocky start because there is no good way to translate Got Milk in Spanish. It's just going to sound offensive. It's not going to make any sense. So they couldn't figure out how to do it. So what they decided to do is they decided to not use a literal translation. They decided to use something else in Spanish, but instead they focused on the culture, on the values that Hispanics tend to associate with milk. So rather than publishing content in Spanish all the time and promoting the campaign in Spanish all the time, they started appealing to the values. This little image, for instance, shows a little doggy who's very sad because he has empanadas, a sweet bread, but it doesn't have milk. And just like milk and cookies is a staple in American households, sweet bread and milk, it's a staple of Hispanic households. So we look at the dog, we understand what he's going through, and it shows because look at the amount of likes that they're getting. Look at the amount of engagement that they're getting. Why? Because their focus was on culture and family. And actually their slogan was family, love, and milk. Very successful campaign. Another example that you have probably seen on TV is the Allstate's Mala Suerte campaign. Mala Suerte means bad luck. Hispanics are notoriously superstitious. So what Allstate decided to do is they are encouraging people to get insured because of bad luck. Have people, and the commercials that you see, they show people getting into situations where no one else can be blamed except because of bad luck, right? That was the only cause of the situation. But that's how they're promoting their business, their campaigns. And again, because they appeal to our superstitions, something that we can relate to, they're having very good success with that campaign.
And I love that example too, because I know I've seen the English version of that commercial, which is a different character, an English speaking character who they call Mayhem, which is, similar sentiment, but there's that slight difference there between bad luck versus mayhem. I think, and bad luck plays a bit more into the superstition, and is more, more culturally appropriate and probably makes more sense in the language as well. Um,
It does.
yeah, I love that they took that extra step to do a different campaign specifically for their Hispanic audiences.
Yeah, and they're having great success with this. Okay, now the question is, how do we engage the Hispanic market? Now that we know we should appeal to the values, now that we know what's important, what those values are, how do we reach the Hispanic market? We've defined this particular reach into two different variables, the platform that you use and the language that you use. By language, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to use Spanish, although we heavily recommend it and see great success with it. But beyond language, within the Hispanic community, Hispanic market, you have people from different that speak different dialects of Spanish. So some words that mean something in one culture might mean different things for another culture. I think, as Hispanics, universally love sports. But if you go to South America, for instance, they're going to love baseball more than they love soccer. And if you come closer to the United States, like Mexico, we don't pay that much attention to baseball, but go crazy for soccer. So there's nuances, not only in the language, but also in the values. And the best way to determine the cultural relevant events and cultural insights for your particular audience is typically just by looking at the US Census Bureau website and see the type of Hispanic audience that your particular region in the country is getting. For instance, New York, they have a heavily Dominican, Puerto Rican, Hispanic population, for instance, whereas if you go to the South, then you get more Mexicans in those particular areas. Again, the reason why you want to know the type of audience and where they're coming from, the type of audience that's closer to you and that you want to appeal to, is because the values or the words might be a little different, and you have to adjust for those accordingly. Does that make sense? Um,
Yes, it does to me. But if it didn't make sense to anyone, please let us know in the questions.
yeah, I don't know why I asked that. No one can look back, but uh, okay, so great. Now that you've accounted for those differences and you've decided you're going to use maybe Spanish, you're going to use maybe English, and you have your images, what's the best way to reach the Hispanic customer? What we have seen, not only us, but just about every media company in the country, is digital. This quote comes directly from Google. US Hispanics are ahead of the curve when it comes to digital. But despite the facts, these consumers are vastly underserved, and the opportunities to reach them through digital remain largely untapped. And this is so true. When you analyze the media spend by companies, you're going to notice that they still rely heavily on TV, print, and radio, but they're not engaging in digital advertising as much. The reason is TV has worked for 30 years. So the large media companies are built for TV. The advertisers are still thinking TV is the best way to reach Hispanic consumers, but the demographics have changed. We are now heavy um, users of social media, for instance, of search. That's where we're getting our information. That's where we're doing our research using digital channels. Again, just want to clarify, I'm not saying TV and print and radio are no longer useful. Of course they're useful, but the digital component of a marketing campaign is becoming increasingly important. This is just to show you some facts from Nielsen, where they have established that Hispanics not only are heavy users of digital tools and digital social media, for instance, or YouTube, or all these different channels, but they respond more to those. They are more engaged in those channels than the general population. So when it comes to generating engagement, maybe in terms of likes, tweets, blog posts, or whatnot, digital really works very well. Even inside the digital spectrum, mobile, it's huge. It's very important. Um, we use our mobile devices for more things and more frequently than any other demographic group in the country. I've heard some explanations, read some articles that say that because of the digital divide, Hispanics don't have a whole lot of access to the internet other than through their devices, which might explain why we're so heavy when it comes to using our mobile devices. Um, I personally, for instance, use a lot of my cell phone applications to communicate with friends and family that I have in different parts of the world. So using applications like WhatsApp or Skype, that really helps me. But whatever the reason may be, mobile first, as a strategy, right now it's very important. That's the most engagement that we're seeing with our clients when it comes to reaching Hispanics in advertising campaigns, and even inside the mobile space, video like YouTube, it's very big and it's undertapped. We're running campaigns for large brands who are paying a fraction of what they're paying, you know, for their English only campaigns when they start using things like YouTube, because not a whole lot of people know that that's what we know, that's what we prefer, and that's how we respond. But those marketers who have that knowledge, and are willing to do experiments and give these platforms a try are getting a really great return on their investment.
And I can speak to that a bit from C3's perspective too. We have a Google grant, which for those of you who aren't familiar is Google gives 501c3 nonprofit organizations. If you apply through their program, it's pretty easy, and they give you $10,000 in-kind AdWords per month. So that's essentially $10,000 of free money to advertise your organization using Google AdWords through their Google Grants program. And one way that we've really been maximizing the Google grants that we manage for our clients is by running, for those who do have a significant Hispanic audience or are trying to be very intentional about reaching their Hispanic audiences, is running both English and Spanish campaigns. And we've seen huge success since adding more Spanish language campaigns into the Google grants, because there are less organizations who are basically, it's run on like an auction system. And there are fewer marketers who are being proactive and bidding on Spanish language keywords. So it's easier to purchase some of those keywords that there are millions of Hispanics out there who are Googling, probably billions. And but you can pay a lot less for them than their English counterpart, if that makes sense. So that's been great for us and for the nonprofits that we work with.
Yeah, and in addition, YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. So I agree completely. It's hugely undertapped, um, and people are getting really great results with video.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I wanted to add too, Carlos, where you're talking about mobile. So for the nonprofits who are on this webinar right now, or even if there are any for-profits on here, I think one of the things that often gets overlooked when we talk about mobile is email campaigns and how important it is to have your email campaign optimized for mobile. I can't tell you how many bad emails I get from, not from any of you, but from other organizations where I try to open the email on my phone and it just looks terrible. So I think, in addition to making sure that the communications, whether culturally or literally through language, are appropriate for the audience that you're trying to reach. I think also just doing testing on mobile for your email campaigns, because email is so critical for nonprofits, particularly for reaching donors. That's hugely important. So don't miss that.
Absolutely, very important. Okay, now let's talk about some tips. And then again, these are lessons that we have learned about what works with the Hispanic market and what doesn't work with the Hispanic market. We have been lucky enough to work with a number of organizations to be able to get a very clear idea of the challenges and opportunities. So here's what we have learned. You need to assemble the right team. Some people, some organizations we've seen, they have their heart in the right place. They want to connect with the Hispanic market, but the way in which they decide which team is going to reach out to the Hispanic community is simply by maybe just looking around their office and go, well, you have a Hispanic last name, you're in the marketing team, you say that you know a little bit of Spanish, you're in the Hispanic marketing team. These folks are people who don't really have a keen understanding of the Hispanic culture and or marketing. So your team, don't just rely on them because they are Hispanic or because they know a little bit of Spanish or a whole lot of Spanish. You need bigger skills. You need still, don't forget your fundamentals. You still need marketing expertise. You still need targeting. You still need data analysis. So just be careful when you start selecting the folks that you have chosen to help you reach out to the Hispanic community. You want to make sure that you have the right team with the right skills. The second thing that we wanted to share with you, focus on the culture. We already talked about this. Uh, I think language is incredibly important, but even beyond language, if there's no resources for that, just the culture, the values that you can communicate through your images, through your videos, that's very important too. I would say it's even more important than just using language by itself. Um, Target the right market segment. We spoke a little bit about this. Understand the type of Hispanic audience that you have, again, because their values and preferences and interests are going to change. Perhaps not drastically, but uh, enough to the point where you have to adjust your marketing strategies to see what's going to get a Hispanic audience or Hispanic volunteers or donors to respond to your marketing messages. Trying doesn't count. Again, we've seen people who want to run an ad in Spanish, so they just run their English copy through Google Translate, and they end up publishing all these ads in print or digitally, ads in Spanish that don't really make any sense. They're grammatically incorrect. They don't really say anything, and you could argue, well, at least they tried. But as Hispanics, we look at that, and that really makes a bad impression. They don't put the effort. They don't make they don't want to go the extra mile to just make sure that they're using the language correctly. So trying just for the sake of trying doesn't count. If you're gonna do it right. There's tons of resources online. There's freelancers that you can hire. Just make sure that you double check your Spanish. Embrace digital. Again, digital is incredibly an incredible field right now. We're not only getting better response for our clients using digital channels, but also your cost per conversion. As you measure it and you can optimize it, those costs are going to be lower than you can get using other channels like offline channels. Measure and pivot. Once you establish a campaign, make sure that you have some type of metric that you can use to gauge how high is up, to measure your level of success. If that doesn't work, move on to the next thing, or take the lessons that you learned and apply them using a different platform or in a different context. But it's very important to document your efforts to figure out what it is and what it's not working. And finally, be consistent. And I think also that's why digital is so important. If you run, for instance, a TV campaign just for the summer, for the rest of the year, what happens? We feel forgotten. We feel like you're not reaching out to us. But especially when you take a look at sports industries who are seasonal, baseball or basketball, they engage with the Hispanic culture all year round. Maybe not as heavily as they would do as when it is prime season, but through email messages, through Facebook videos, through all these different digital channels, they want to stay in touch with the Hispanic community to make us feel included, to make us be present and aware of the existence of these organizations. So don't just think, well, Christmas is coming up, I'm going to have this huge campaign and then I'm going to forget about it. If that's the only option, well, there's no arguing against that. But if you have the possibility, it is highly recommended that you stay consistent with your efforts and you stay in touch as often as you can. Okay, now what we just covered, it's been already 45 minutes and we barely scratched the surface. There's tons of resources out there, there's tons of metrics, there's tons of studies that you want to read and learn more about the Hispanic market as it applies to your organizations and the challenges that your organization faces, maybe in terms of getting more donors, maybe in terms of getting more support from the Hispanic community. These are some of the resources that we typically recommend and that we rely upon when it comes to staying in touch and understanding different Hispanic market segments that we work with. Google Alerts, just set them up for your industry and use the term Hispanic or Spanish in combination to the type of organization that you have, and you'll get a better idea for any organizations out there that are similar to you and understand the type of efforts that they're carrying. Any new studies, any new research, it's going to pop right into your email. It's a very convenient tool. The Census Bureau has an incredible amount of information. It's very easy to use. All you have to do is punch in a couple of parameters, and the website will give you the type of information that you're looking for. It's very, very helpful. There are organizations like Pew Research, Nielsen, and AdAge that constantly publish studies about the Hispanic market. That's a really great way to stay in touch with the latest metrics, the latest developments. That'll help you understand from a quantifiable standpoint the size and the opportunity of the Hispanic market segment that you want to reach. So those are the resources. And finally, we wanted to issue a challenge, a good challenge, because again, like I said in the beginning, the purpose of an event like this is to incite action, to inspire some thoughts, hopefully design some kind of a plan that's going to benefit our organizations. So if you're already reaching out to the Hispanic market, take a look at what you've learned today about the values, about the tools, about the concerns, and see if your current efforts, do they feel authentic? Do they feel a little stale? Maybe they need to be updated. Look for those areas of improvement and start measuring the depth, the type of engagement that you get. If you haven't yet reached out to the Hispanic market, again, look at the size of an opportunity that the Hispanic market represents, and start using some digital channels. Probably the easiest one to use would be Facebook, because we are heavy as a Hispanic culture. We're heavy social media users. It's very easy to reach us via Facebook. But also, as you move forward, there's going to be some uncovered opportunities in terms of perhaps very specific Google AdWords campaigns, maybe YouTube videos, maybe Instagram, who's becoming increasingly important, and start using those tools that are generating the best results for you. That's the information that we wanted to share with you.
Great. And we have a couple questions here as well. And before we get to those, first of all, thank you, Carlos, for all of that fantastic information. I think you are just so smart in so many ways, and I appreciate you sharing, both your perspective as, someone with lived experience as a member of that Hispanic audience, and then also, sharing your perspective as an incredibly intelligent digital marketer. So thank you first. And I also wanted to add here to this webinar, as I said a bit in the beginning, is part of this ongoing series that C3 has been doing in 2016 that's all about diversity and inclusion in many different ways. And we have more webinars coming up. But I think one thing that really stood out to me and what Carlos was saying is that you don't just want to default to having the one person with a Hispanic sounding last name be running your Hispanic marketing campaign. And and I think for me that also goes back to just how important it is for nonprofits to have staff members and board members that mirror the communities that they're working within. And so the last challenge that I'd like to give, from C3 to all of you, is to think critically about how you increase to really make that a key consideration when you're hiring. If it's really important for you to reach the Hispanic audience, but you're not thinking about, if then there's a disconnect between that need and the hiring decisions you're making. I think that's not going to serve your nonprofit well, and that's not going to help you grow. So being very intentional about, hiring the kind of people who are going to help you communicate authentically to these audiences. That'd be Hispanic people, maybe Latino people, depending on how they define themselves. And building out your own networks of people who are Hispanic or Latino, so that when you do have positions opening up, that people who you can share those opportunities with, and they can help spread it around to their own communities. For me, at least, and at C3, that's been how we've seen change happening here. It's hard, it's challenging, but it really is about diversifying and making your own networks more inclusive. And it's a slow but steady progress. So I think particularly for us, more progressive nonprofits, being really intentional and thoughtful about that can make a massive difference. And so I wanted to add that challenge there as well. Now we have about 10 minutes. So if you have other questions, please drop them here. I see a few different ones coming in. And so we have one from Justina who asks, if we don't have a Spanish counterpart to our website, does it make sense for us to use advertisements in Spanish? And this is something I've heard from nonprofits too. So Carlos, I'd love to know what you think here.
Yeah, we still do it. We still do
Yeah.
it um, because number one, it's a good indication. It's a good test for measuring the level of engagement that you're gonna get. So a lot of companies or organizations who don't really want to invest immediately into translating all their content, they start running campaigns in Spanish to see the type of engagement that they're getting. If they're getting tons of clicks, if they're getting tons of likes, that means there's an affinity that their audience has for Spanish language content, and that's how they decide, okay, well, maybe we need to start investing in Spanish content. The second reason why we recommend doing that is because as Hispanics, we don't typically see a lot of marketing materials in Spanish geared towards us. So if you get, let's say, 10 pieces of mail in your inbox, the one that you're guaranteed to look at just because it's in Spanish, it's it's the one in Spanish.
Mm.
It's something that you're gonna identify with. It's something that's gonna jump out at you. Again, you may not have interest, you may not engage, but you will definitely see that email, that video, that ad, and try to engage with it, even if it's out of curiosity. And again, uh, I think the value really comes in testing the waters first and see the type of engagement that you get from using Spanish as a as a conduit to start uh, promoting engagement with your organization.
That's
So I
great.
would say yes. I would say yes. Let's
Yes, go for it.
go for it. Yes.
Great. And so this is not necessarily your area of expertise, but maybe you have some thoughts here. I think this is kind of piggybacking on what I was saying about staffing. Stuart asked, would Carlos be willing to talk about the issue of developing a more diverse board of directors and recruiting from the Hispanic community for board positions at a nonprofit? So I think the majority of your work, Carlos, has been outside of the nonprofit community. But maybe there are some corollaries that you've seen from some of the for-profit organizations that you've worked with, either trying to recruit more staff from the Hispanic community or trying to appropriately staff their campaigns with Spanish speakers and ideally Hispanic people.
Uh,
So do you have any thoughts there?
yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. I think as a culture, the reason why we may not um, want to take those let's say a board position or something like that is not because we don't want to or because we don't support the cause. It's because we don't know about them.
Mm.
When organizations try to recruit for their board of directors for hiring positions, they typically overlook the Hispanic market. As a result, we don't even know that those kinds of opportunities are available. One thing that we've recommended in the past is if you have if you live in a large suburb in a large urban area, chances are you're going to have a local chamber of commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce are really great because they typically serve as an initial point of contact both for nonprofits who want to engage more with the Hispanic community and also from Hispanic consumers or job seekers or professionals who want to get more involved in the community. So if you want to advertise the different positions that you may have, if you're looking for volunteers, again, your local chambers of commerce are going to be a great resource to start spreading the word again, because sometimes we won't support an organization, or you won't see us as heavy participants for no other reason than the fact that we don't know about the organization or what it has to offer.
Great. I think that's such a great point. Making sure that you're educating people first about the opportunities that are out there, as opposed to kind of going into a community with a sledgehammer and being like, "Hey, look at these opportunities, check this out," and then being surprised when you don't get many responses from people because you're a total stranger to them and they don't know what you're asking them.
Yes. Yeah.
That is such a great point. Another question that we have is, are there any nonprofits who you think are examples of organizations that do Spanish language content really well? Whether these are nonprofits who predominantly are built to serve the Hispanic community, like I think someone said they were working with the NCLR, or other organizations who you think just do a great job there.
Yeah. Um, St. Jude's Hospital, is that a non-profit organization?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, they do a great job of reaching the Hispanic community. You can see them on TV, you can see them online in Spanish. I think they have some content in their website in Spanish. To be honest, I haven't looked at their website in a while. But they do a great job in not only connecting with Hispanics in Spanish, but also the imagery that they use. They show you scenes that will move your heart, that will incite you to get involved. And also, they do it throughout the year. In seasons like Thanksgiving, Christmas, you'll see their commercials more often than not. But even during the summer, you will see a promotion running with a company or something that makes you that reminds you that they are there. Um, so I think they do a great job with reaching to the Hispanic community.
That's great. And I think just to add on to that from my perspective too, I think some of the best examples that I've seen, well, first, I think for those who aren't familiar, NCLR is the National Council of excuse me, La
La Raza.
Raza. Thank you. Sorry. I do speak some Spanish sometimes, but obviously not that frequently. So when you look at their Facebook page, you'll see that they do a mix of posts in Spanish and English. They switch back and forth all the time. And I think they're a great example. And then the other pages that I like to really look at and learn from are actually pages that are more geared towards content creation.
Mhm.
So those for me, the ones that I like are like NPR's Latino USA.
Yes.
And BuzzFeed has a channel that I love called Pero Like, which is all about, it was really for these kind of millennial Spanish speakers who, are just constant, the name itself, pero, the Spanish word for but, and then like, English. It's for these millennials who are totally at the center of these two cultures, and they're not thinking like, when am I going to switch between English and Spanish, and when is one more appropriate? But that's just the world that they live in. It's just natural to them. And so I think those are two resources that I found are really helpful, both for reading about things that the Latino or Hispanic community might be interested in, and then also just seeing how people who are Hispanic who are creating media. Because even though we all work for nonprofits, we're still, if we're in communications, we are content creators and we are publishers in our own right. Seeing how they talk about different issues and how they present, Spanish language content.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And even the largest corporations, again, I understand they're a for-profit um, for-profit organizations, but at least you'll get a feel for what it is that they're doing to connect with this audience. And again, you'll see, for instance, commercials from Coca-Cola that have no words except very moving images. You'll see banners that also have maybe just a couple of words in Spanish, or words that can be easily understood in Spanish, um, and maybe just an image. But as far as best practices and inspiration, just look at the for-profit sector, the large companies, and see how they do it. and chances are you'll be able to get some pointers from how to take what they're doing and apply it to the your particular organization, understanding that there's going to be some constraints as far as budget and things, but at least the essence of how they're doing it, it's going to be very helpful.
Great. Well, and it is 2 o'clock. So thank you everyone for joining us and staying with us today. Thank you again so much, Carlos. This was so wonderful. We're going to send out the slides and the recording of this webinar after. So you'll have access to all this information, and Carlos's information is here. So please get in touch with him, hire him. He's fantastic. And we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.